It's another Fourth Art Saturday video hop organized by Meri Atelier. Please follow the description box below for the links to the other crafters and artists. Hi, this is Roy from Bootsie Sweettarts Guide to Life and Other Disappointing Experiences with this month's theme, architecture. Well, this was a fun challenge. Where do architecture and art cross paths? And it's probably they, in truth, go hand in hand and walk the same journey. Growing up in New York City, architecture had always been an important influence in my life, to the fact that I even started 2 years of college in the School of Architecture at the City College of New York, which is already in itself a beautiful piece of architecture. So quickly I decided to use quilting as my art representation for this hop. Quilting has always involved architecture, whether it be the log cabin, the rail fence, cathedral window patterns, the courthouse steps. Architecture and quilting have always been joined together. So I chose the Grandma's Attic Window block. I love the name. It's got a lot of romance to it. It's an easy block, 3 pieces, basically 2 shapes. Anyone can do them, but I think, as you can see, the result is kind of dramatic. So please stay with me and see what I do with Grandma's Attic block. A major component of any architectural design is how do you get the outside into the building, and what is the building saying to the public from the outside. And windows have been integral for that part of architectural design. So coming up with a window idea for architecture for the monthly hop on this month, architecture and art, led me right to the window, the attic window, or I call it Grandma's attic window. In a previous video, I made a tumbling block book cover, and I think in that video, which I'll post in the description box if you'd like to see it, you learn that I love playing with the eye and vision and optical illusions, and when it comes to quilting, it's a lot of fun. In Grandma's attic window, the way you design with only these 3 shapes creates an optical illusion that you're looking through a window. And when you tweak it a little bit and play with it, you'll see how many interesting combinations you can have. So basically it's 2 similar, what do they call this in geometry? They're similar. No, there's another name because they're more accurately, they're more alike than just similar. And a square. And for this project, I'll just run through it. And please, if you'd like me to make a detailed video on how I put this together, I'd love to do that. You take the square, any size, and then you make strips. So you have a fabric square, and you make strips of 2 contrasting colors. They can be the same, they can be different colors. And you'll see when it goes together, it's just very, very simple. There's a 45-degree angle, and you cut strips out, cut the strip out 45 degrees, and you want a lot of hangover here. So, hangover, day after New Year's. So here you can see, here's the square that I chose for this. I think it's a 3-inch square. It's about 3 inches. and it's arbitrary, and it's fun here because I don't have to measure so much. And you know me and measuring. Measure thrice and cut once, and then you still unsew. You still unsew. So you cut a bunch of these in two different colors. One has to be dark, one has to be light. And you place them, you sew them in a Y seam. Now again, in that full Tumbling Block video, I show you how in detail I do a Y seam. And since I'm only doing, I'm only using 4 window window blocks for my project, I'm going to do it the really old-fashioned way. So this is what it looks like. So this is what it is, and if you squint a little and use your imagination, you can see that your eye is drawn into the block, the square. It gets even more dramatic if you use a print of some kind. So here's just another 3-inch square that I cut. Now, I think it's a little easier to imagine you're looking in a window. You're looking out a window into a Christmas tree. It's nice. And if you turn these around, you get a different viewpoint. Now here, if you look, it looks like I'm looking down at the Santa Claus. Here, I think it looks like it's looking down this way. And finally, if I turn them this way, okay, it's now I'm looking from the right. Before I was looking from the left, right. So that's the basic idea of Grandma's attic window. Well, this is making noise, I'm sure. So you see I play with a lot of paper before I decide to cut up the fabric, even though, my goodness, I have so much fabric. What did I make here? I made a lot of papers. So here's another design. And then what you wind up doing in the end is creating a whole big window frame. I was so fortunate to go through my stash. Now remember, the theme is architecture. And I found fabric I had bought. I didn't even remember I had it. Look at this fabric for the theme of architecture. It's like an old Grandma Moses kind of painting. So I decided that this was going to be my focus fabric. And I cut, these are 5-inch squares. Yes, 5-inch squares. So the intent is to make the project a window frame that looks like you're looking out in your neighborhood. Well, I auditioned a couple of fabrics based on just what I had in my hand, and you can see that I did things like this, made that dark, and then, well, this one's too short, but you get the idea. And that's pretty. You can start to see, let me put this so it's clearer. Yeah. You can start to see that you're looking out the window. I like that, was nice. And I just kept playing. And more I played, the more I love this idea. Just auditioned and auditioned. But what I discovered was it can look really interesting if you flip the fabric to the back side. Now you have a light and a dark with basically it's the same fabric. Now, this wasn't very dramatic, but some of the other combinations were. Take these for instance. This is a very muted beigey color. When you turn it over, it's very light. And I like this one a lot. This one was a little more subtle, a little more realistic. But then, looking through my fabric, I came across this fabric. Oops. And I said, architecture bricks. This is it. So I took all the others away, even though I had made a couple of sample blocks just to see what it would look like. And I still like this enough where I'll finish two more, and make a duplicate of this project. And oh, excuse me, I realized that when I turn this upside down, it becomes really dramatic, and I love this. So this became my end result. Now I cut these strips in a complementary way so that they're different when you turn them over. I cut them much longer than they needed to be, because I'm bad at measuring, so I wanted to give myself some extra meat. So they were actually this big if you look at it this way compared to the square, and simply position them where this was the side wall of the window frame, and this was the sill area. And now I'm starting to get a really nice perspective. There's some direction my eye is moving. Then I take my box, my square, and here I marked 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I did that because I'm getting old. And the convention is 1/4 inch. But sometimes conventions are made to be ignored. I didn't say that. This is one way of doing it. There are 3 or 4 ways, and now that I'm looking at this, I'm realizing that I did it a different way, but it all works out. And I line up the corner of the block, the square, with the angle where the 45-degree angle touches the raw edge. Now these points are wherever I stitch, that's where the stitching ends. I do not stitch into the seam allowance, and you will see this if you see the other video. So we sew along here, and now that becomes the bottom sill. This little excess will get cut off later. And then we do the same for the side of the window. So I want it like this, so I have to fold this over. Let me show you that. This can get confusing for those of us who are a little simple-minded. This has to go line up with the edge of the square block. There, see where I'm lining it up? If I make another video of this project in detail, I'll go through this really slowly and maybe remind myself to show the other ways that you can do this. If you're making a very big quilt, this way could take a long time. Now again, we want no fabric caught in that spot. We want absolutely no fabric caught in that spot. You can see already that I've missed that. So I have to fold everything back. Fold this first piece back, and then sew from dot to dot here. So now I've sewn these two seams from dot to dot, dot to dot, making sure I catch no fabric where that dot is, in the corner where they meet. Now you get a feeling for what I've done. It helps here to press, and I've gotten kind of used to pressing seams open on projects that are not regular quilts. This is a little crooked here, but alright, I'm not going to undo that. Now all you do is fold the two parts of the frame together, making sure they match identically. Get the block, the square, out of the way. Pin, I'm a great pinner. Pin as many places as you want. You do not want this to shift around, or you won't get a square in the end. And like one of my samples before I finish this, you wind up with a wonky block. Now what I'm going to do, you see here's a 45-degree angle here. See, this is the 45. I'm going to go from the point where all the stitching ended at that dot and do a 1/2 inch seam allowance from that dot to the edge of the block. From that dot here, see it? You see it's right here. It's difficult to see on this fabric. It's right there. Ooh, and there's also glare. Sorry about that. To the end, and I'll mark it just to be sure. So now I've sewn that from where the point is. That point's kind of important. See, everything meets there. Everything meets at that spot. Nothing is sewn together. That's like no man's land there. The DMZ. Now you can trim these to 1/4 inch if you want, and I will at some point. But basically now the block is finished. Takes a little while if you're doing, do you hear my G from my Long Island G? If you're doing a big quilt, this is a long process, but it's classic. And then you trim this off. I don't want to bring out that big ruler because it does shine. Let's see if I can get away with this guy. You trim it. And you have your block. It's done. Pressing is really helpful. The other thing that's helpful is if you starch your fabric fairly stiffly in the beginning. So here we are. This is the basic of the block. Isn't it pretty? I like it. Again, what helps me a great deal are paper planning blocks. Do a mock-up. And here is a similar design to what I'm going to finish with. And what we do is we add a sashing in between the two blocks, because it's going to be a 4-block quilt panel. Add sashing in between the single blocks. Okay. You add sashing in between this part. Then you add, you add sashing in the middle, and then you put your frame around it, your border around it. And this is what the project looks like. And now I crumbled mine. But here's the finished block. Am I upside down or right side up? I'm right side up. Here is Trim As You Sow, says George Trapon. Here is the block. I'll square it up in a minute, but it's basically done. Press it. The next thing I'm doing, this is going to be the pocket of a tote. This is only the pocket, so I need to have a backing. So I took a piece of black fabric and made a backing and did a little bit of quilting, you'll see. So I took my 4x4 panel, attached it to an inexpensive bag, tote, that I have bought from the 99-cent store, and I dressed it up. And what I did was I took a bigger stitch, like a basting stitch almost, around, so that when the bag gets old and crummy, I can take this off very easily since I'm an expert at unsewing. I hope you enjoyed this hop. Please support the other artists and crafters who have participated. Thank you, Meri Atelier, for your patience. I'm very late with this, but I had some issues. Old people have issues. And thank you so much for sticking through to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, please stay well, stay smart, stay safe, and bye for now.